We are recording for audio.
And I'm recording for video.
All right, here we go. I am vengeance. I am the night. I am Anthony.
I'm David.
I'm Dr. Kurt's dad.
I'm Katie.
And I'm Jim.
Welcome to issue number 168 of the Crimson Cowl Comic Club podcast. Each and every week we meet here to talk about comic books. We have a couple club discussions that we've been doing in the past couple episodes. We won't have one today, but just for our listeners and viewers at home, in the upcoming weeks, we'll have Batman Adventures, the Adventures Continue number 8, which will be the conclusion to that mini-series. We will be talking about Inkblot number 6 and Crossover number 4. Some of those might be coming out. I think they all come out in February. Some might leak into March based on when we get those issues. But just to give you a heads up on what to look forward to. We also have weekly reviews we're going to do on today's show. Going to go all the way around the internet, talk about the books that we've been reading, both new and old. And then we have a letters page question, which I'll read here. Gives you time to think about your answer for later in the show. In the spirit of DC's future state, pick one character and where their story and status would be at any given time in the future. An example for that would be, let's say Howard the Duck is now Captain America. So you basically just get to choose, one character's path and fate. So we'll talk about that in the letters page later on. But let's kick it off with the weekly reviews. I'm going to start with Strange Academy, issue number 7. This is a series that I have absolutely adored. This here is by Scotty Young, Alberto Ramos, and Edgar Delgado. Welcome to the Strange Academy, where the best and brightest young sorcerers are trained by the greatest magic users in the realm, all of whom are gathered at the Sorcerer Supreme, Dr. Stephen Strange. They're gathered by, rather. Humans, Asgardians, and demons alike all filled the halls with fun, laughter, and learning. Then, the unthinkable happened. While trying to rescue one of their fellow students from the nefarious group of Hollow, one of the Strange Academy students has been killed, and another's light is dwindling. So this book kicked off with a character named Emily, who was basically getting prepared to go to her first semester, first year of Strange Academy. This book basically has the vibe of like Marvel's Runaways when it comes to introducing a bunch of new characters with some very familiar supporting characters, but you don't really deal with that at all. This one being like Doctor Strange and Doc Voodoo, Scarlet Witch, Man-Thing. All of them are basically the teachers at this school. Runaways Comics did that too, just kind of introducing all the new characters, but like Captain America would show up here and there, and Cloak and Dagger and things like that. But it's really focusing on the children, and that's where the aspect of like Harry Potter comes into play. So it's basically Runaways meets Harry Potter, if that's something that you're into. It's a very good series for brand new readers, since you are jumping in with these kids. You got Emily, Doyle, Shaylee, Elvie, Eric, Desi, Zoe, Toth, Gus, Germaine, and Calvin. Calvin is a character that kind of went off on his own. They were all playing this giant game of hide and seek over the last issue or two, and Calvin kind of disappeared into this other world, and he came in contact with the Hollow, which is basically this big cult group of trees, these big tree monsters. They weren't as I'm trying to compare to Groot. Groot's a little more friendly, not in Groot's original appearance, but they're probably leaning more towards that. But Calvin went missing, so then all the kids are trying to figure out how to track him down. Of course, they're not telling the teachers about this, even though they could probably very easily get their friend back. And but with doing so, they would get in trouble. So they're trying to do this under the radar because they're kind of playing hooky from school and stuff like that. So this issue, the last month's issue, was dealing with the search for Calvin. This issue is dealing with the aftermath of these characters that are going that face the Hollow. We did have Doctor Strange and some of the other teachers show up once they found out what was happening, and basically to save these children. And there was a huge battle last month, and there was a casualty. For those that have yet to read it, or are inspired to read it based off of this kind of first arc preview here, I'm going to leave some of the details out on the characters. But you have one of the kids is at a loss. We lose the character, and what made this one special was the fact that since these are brand new characters, you actually felt the death meant something, rather than being like, oh, well, Wolverine died again. Okay, we've been there. He'll be back next week. This is something that actually kind of, hit pretty hard in the story. And then you have another character that is kind of, as the premise said, dwindling right now. So this whole issue is dealing with just the idea of them kind of going off and getting into trouble, and dealing with the consequence of this young student who died within, I don't know if it's within the first couple weeks of school or months, at least since this issue or the series started, 7 issues in here. So there's a lot of powerful moments with Doctor Strange sitting down with one of the characters and kind of really talking about, the weight that is on his shoulders now that this has happened, and he wants to go and try to figure out how to move on from this moment. But I will share some of the art on the inside here. There's a giant tiger god character that they go and they talk to in this issue. But the art is just gorgeous. The writing's perfect. Here's some examples of the of our character art, just kind of show you what it's like. This is an awesome book. I could not love it more. And I think we had that first issue before COVID caused the delays. So we had like 1 or 2 issues, and then we had to like sit there for the longest time. But I'm happy that now the book has returned and is now starting at second arc with issue number 7. So that is Strange Academy from Marvel Comics. And this would be a very fun thing of like, I immediately just want to see these characters in a Disney Plus show, if you will, and because that very easy premise of Harry Potter but with Marvel characters, that seems like a winning combination. So all right, so that was that one. We will move on to David for the next issue.
Okay. Well, we didn't talk about any of our Batman adventures, group discussions here. But I'll throw a little Wolverine into the mix and talk about Amalgam's Dark Claw adventures. This revisits Dark Claw, who was introduced earlier in the Amalgam comics. And so at the time they were doing the Batman adventures comics also. So they kind of took that and ran with that with the mixture. And again, you have the Dark Claw character, who's a mixture of Batman and Wolverine, along with his sidekick Sparrow, who is a mixture of Robin and Jubilee. And here we meet, they were able to take these kind of aliases that both Batman and Wolverine had. Wolverine would sometimes operate as Patch, and Bruce, Batman would do Matches Malone. So they give you here Patch Malone,
Yes.
who is the mixture of those two, so he kind of goes undercover, and that's how he goes and hangs out at the bar and listens for to all these conversations to get the inside scoop into the underworld. But he's attacked, even in that, guys. And of course, this, as you can kind of see, is all done in that same style of the Batman animated series, how they carried that over to the comics. In fact, I think even the cover, I would believe they did this cover basically in Batman Adventures, which was the comic based on that. So in this issue, we go on. He's being attacked, and he finds out that he's being hunted down by an ex-lover who is a mixture of Talia and Lady Deathstrike. So you get this cyborg version of Talia. And as the result, she's got like the long, sharp fingers and all that stuff. And it turns out that we get a flashback to her father, who was it's like Race Apocalypse or whatever the name was. I'm trying to remember exactly how they put it, but they mixed, Ra's al Ghul and Apocalypse, and Darkclaw is forced to kill him. And so years later, Talia is seeking revenge, against her former lover for the death of her father. And she's just filled with anger. She tried so hard to save her father, that she burned she says 80% of her flesh or something like that. And it's all replaced by cybernetics, giving her that Lady Deathstrike appearance. So she's hunted him down, and after all this time is seeking her revenge. Sparrow really plays kind of a minor part in this, in that she's in the there's a name for it. It's not the Bat Cave. There is some sort of a lair type name for it. But Talia is able to take her out pretty quickly and ties her up. Once she believes that Darkclaw is dead, she then releases Sparrow because she has nothing against her. But it's kind of a story that deals with anger, and Darkclaw tries to convince her, hey, I know what that's like. I've had this inside of me, and I know what it's like to get revenge and think that, that's going to fix all of your problems, but it just makes it worse. As a matter of fact, in the beginning of the story, when he was in his disguise of Patch Malone, he was actually listening for information because he still hasn't caught the person who murdered his parents. So he's still on that vengeance kick himself. So they have the big battle as they're discussing it, and he tries to convince her that really she's her real enemy, not him. And it really has that look and feel of the classic Batman, the animated series, or Batman Adventures type of comic appearance, and yet still feels a lot like the Darkclaw that you get introduced to in his other #1 issue that never went to a #2 or anything. So this one was, I'm trying to remember who did the publishing on this one. This was a DC Comics published comic, because again, Marvel had published some of the Amalgam comics, and DC published others. A lot of times it's difficult to tell just who actually did which one, and then other times it feels very much one way or the other. The Darkclaw stuff really takes a lot from Wolverine, so it's sometimes can be surprising when you think about it that it's DC, because you think you get a little bit more Batman. But it feels like Wolverine's trying to be Batman is really what that character feels like to me. So, but that is one of the last Amalgam comics that I'll be reviewing. I think I have one more. There were others that I didn't get a chance to read, but over the last few weeks, as I've gone through and reviewed some of these, I'm down to the last couple.
Definitely been an entertaining series to follow there. So.
And it was a great series. They did a great job with it, I thought.
Yeah, it's really fun because you get a lot of different styles and you get a lot of different takes, because these creative teams get to really play around with what they're going to do. And I don't know how they divvied up the characters. I think there are some characters that got mixed in with other characters more than once, because you get like a couple different characters that have a little Charles Xavier mixed in, and things like that. So, but I'm sure at some point, they kind of sat down in the room and said, okay, this group is going to take these characters and throw them together, and this group's going to take these characters and so on, just so that you weren't having the same people, everybody wanting to mix Batman with somebody or everybody wanting to mix Spider-Man with somebody. They kind of sorted it out, figured it out, and went with it. And then you do have some comics that mention the other characters. So there was some communication in, what the characters were that was made up in this Amalgam universe. And of course, don't forget to check out the letters pages, which always had the fake letters in them. Some of them give you more information about these characters. Some filling in some of the things that you don't get because you only had one or two issues of these characters.
Good. So we heard about Doctor Strange over in Strange Academy, where, kids are dying. How's Doctor Strange dealing with stuff in the book you're about to talk about?
Well, I've always been a big Doctor Strange fan, and lately I've been trying to go back and read for the first time some pieces I missed of Doctor Strange, because in the 80s and 90s we were living in some more isolated places, Western Kansas, Northern Wisconsin, and I didn't have as much access to comic books at that time. So I had kind of lost touch with Doctor Strange. And then when I started to read it again, suddenly there was this strange change that went on. He no longer could access the Vishanti and the other powers he used to be able to access. Now he had to find various other forms of magic to use. He had lost some of his power. And so I wanted to go back and find out what happened in this period in between when I was reading it and suddenly this new kind of presentation of Doctor Strange. So I went back in the first arc. Well, actually, this is the first arc that leads into it, but I actually started in a different place, which we'll get back to in a little bit. But it all kind of kicks off with an arc called The War of the Seven Spheres. It's primarily in, and I have them in digital here, Doctor Strange 48 and 49 are the primary places where you find it. But the implications of it then carry over into other books like New or Secret Defenders 25, Doctor Strange Sorcerer Supreme number 80, Spectacular Spider-Man 22 and 23. The basic line is what happens is that cyclically there's this huge war in the magical realms that takes place. And it's time for that to happen again. And the Vishanti come to Doctor Strange and they say, we want you to fight as our champion. And at the same time, Agamotto comes to Doctor Strange and says, I want you to fight as our champion. And a bunch of the other forces of magic that Doctor Strange has drawn on all come to him and want him to fight as their champion. And Doctor Strange finds out that the war is going to go on for 5,000 years and says, no, I can't leave Earth to go and fight in this war with all you guys. And so they continually chase him down and And finally he speaks an incantation that says he basically breaks his relationship with all these powers, and that he can no longer call on their magics for himself, which then makes him incredibly weak magically, but he can stay on Earth. And what it leads to is a series of events in which Doctor Strange now has to figure out, how am I going to be the sorcerer, the sorceress protector of Earth, stripped of most of my magical power? And so a lot of then the books that lead up to this point where Doctor Strange has to decide to pick different kinds of magic to utilize to meet the threats that come against the Earth. He has to choose things like Gaia magic, which draws on the energy of the Earth to give him his magic, but it's limited and he can't draw on it very long. So he ends up going to catastrophe magic, which is like randomness superimposed through his powers. And then finally, in probably one of the most interesting series I read after I came back and was catching up on Doctor Strange, he has to turn to dark magic. And it slowly subsumes him as he's trying to use this to save the world. But this is the beginning of that, called the War of the Seven Spheres. And I think it's an incredibly interesting switch in Doctor Strange, because up to that point, Doctor Strange is almost cosmically powerful when you read the comics. Even though there are forces that are almost as powerful as him, he's drawing on energies that are incredible. And then suddenly he reaches a point where he no longer has those anymore. And he has to figure out how will he be the defender of the Earth without these powers. So the beginning of that is the arc called War of the Seven Spheres. And so Doctor Strange, 48, 49, and a lot of the books that are surrounding it then. And as we go over the rest of this week and probably next week I'll go into some of the implications and some of the other books that that come into being because of this switch in Doctor Strange's power.
Cool. Can't wait to hear it. But enough about that guy with the goatee. Let's hear about Iron Man from Katie.
All right, so I have Invincible Iron Man, Volume 1, Reboot. It's from 2015, and it's by Brian Michael Bendis, with art is by David Marquez, color is by Justin Ponsor, and the letterer is our buddy VC's Clayton Cowles. All right, I had a lot of fun reading this book. This was honestly just a fun book. Tony Stark is Iron Man, and he is fighting Madame Mask, who took some artifacts from Victor Von Doom, and Victor is now no longer wearing the not Iron Man. Victor Von Doom later does end up wearing the Iron Man armor. He's no longer wearing his armor as Dr. Doom, and now he's just the guy. So that actually caused some questions. And Tony is dating a young lady who has found a cure for the mutant gene. So that's pretty interesting. You know who does show up in this book? That guy with the goatee, Doctor Strange. So
there is a scene somewhere, and I'm trying to think if it's in the Iron Man book or maybe in Civil War II or something, but there's something where they both talk about, them each having cool facial hair.
Yep, it's in this book.
Okay.
It is in this book. So the premise is Tony is tracking down Madame Mask, and they keep running into each other, and they're trying to get this artifact back from her. So pretty cut and dry superhero stuff right there. There's a question of whether Victor Von Doom is a good guy now, which I guess we'll find out. But he's not wearing his armor anymore, and he's actually really handsome. So that's a new idea, because it was previously stated that he was so scarred and so deformed, and that's why he's always wearing a mask. And Doctor Strange does show up, where they are awesome facial hair bros. Here, I found the page. Tony is trying to tease Doctor Strange into giving him a high five, and Doctor Strange is just there with his arms crossed, looking disgusted. And finally he relents and high fives for awesome facial hair, bros. So that was cool. Let's see. So many ums, my apologies. Tony gets to visit some kids at a hospital, which is a very touching moment where he brings all his Iron Man suits and they think that's the coolest thing. And he lets them put on the helmets and the arc reactor hands. Mary Jane Watson shows up in here. She ultimately helps bring down Madame Mask, who we find out has been possessed by a demon. You know, this was just a really fun book. I read it in one sitting. I liked it a lot. Iron Man here is very clearly modeled after Robert Downey Jr. And I could see this being, you know, interpreted into a Marvel movie or TV show. The artwork in this book is beautiful. It was so easy to look at and really enjoyable. And I know everyone like busts on Bendis for writing novel-length word balloons, but I did not feel that with, well, I say that I open up to a one page, it's all word balloons, but overall, I did not feel like he was just writing paragraphs and sticking it onto a page. So that was actually a pleasant surprise, because I know in recent years, Bendis has gotten a lot of flack for what he's been doing over at DC with Superman, with some people being, you know, pretty disappointed in that. But this was actually really good. I liked it quite a bit. Something positive I liked was that Tony was very respectful of the young woman he was dating, and, you know, was learning about and implementing boundaries and working to respect her as an individual. And I really appreciated that, because sometimes we see Tony and honestly, he's just a real schmuck and a total womanizer. But here he was actually acting like a human being. And I really liked that, because it, you know, it made me sympathetic to him, not just, you know, some rich guy that like I really can't relate to. And he actually had emotional growth here, and it overall served the story. So I liked that quite a bit. Anyway, just a fun Iron Man read. I picked this up at the Comic Book Purge. That is Invincible Iron Man Volume 1 Reboot from Marvel Comics.
Yeah, that thinking about Doctor Doom, and you know, here he's portrayed as actually having a regular unscarred face and everything. For a long time, you never saw Doctor Doom without the mask on. It was just mentioned that he had been disfigured, and so you didn't really know what he looked like under there. And I don't remember where it fell in, and there's been different stories on what he looks like under there and how that's been portrayed. But I do recall at some point that it was revealed, and I think that got changed afterwards, that he actually only had just this little scar, but that Victor Von Doom was so you know, just so into himself that that because he had that scar that he got from the explosion,
so
Reed Richards for, that he couldn't show his face. And I always kind of liked that that storyline, but I think that changed. And I don't remember if he had been shown as being, you know, severely kind of disfigured before then, or where that came in and when that changed. But I do recall there was a time that they had said that, yeah, he just had like this little scar, but he was just so vain that he would not show his face, and that's why he wore the mask, was to cover this little scar. And just I always kind of like that, because it fit very well with the Doctor Doom character.
It does, yeah. No, that's a really cool detail. Thank you for telling me about that. And yeah, he is pretty egotistical, so that actually would make a lot of sense. Very cool.
And when you had
something in here that go ahead.
I was just going to say.
I was going to say something.
Go ahead.
Okay, your turn. All right, okay, fine, I'll go. One detail in here is that I'd like to see picked up is they talk about, well, she has this cure for the mutant genome, and then Tony says, well, like, what are you going to do with it? And she says, absolutely nothing. Like, I don't want it getting out there at all. I actually thought that would be very interesting, and maybe they'll talk about that in later books. Now, in the Marvel Universe, they use mutants and people who have mutations as a metaphor for real life people in our world who have been ostracized versus like a medical or a genetic mutation. So that is one distinction to make. But I'd like to see that explored somewhat, because I think that could be very interesting. And I like my comic books with a slice of philosophy sometimes. So, yeah. Anthony, what would you like to say?
When you had mentioned about, people getting on Bendis about, his dialogue and everything like that,
Yeah.
I ran to the stacks because in the latest issue of Action Comics, the first page I opened up looks like this. And I just laughed just because I was just like, oh, this is going to be a chore. And even though, I love Bendis, I've met him, I own so much of his stuff, but it still has that thing where I open is like right away on page 1. I was like, okay, buckle down. I got some reading to do. I just thought
that's funny.
Yeah.
That is very good.
Yeah. Good. All right. Then we're going to jump over to Jim. We've heard enough about, some normal history of, the DC Comics and stuff like that. Let's hear about some other DC Comics history.
Okay. Although you're just talking about Bendis writing like, pages and pages of text, this one is like that.
Oh my goodness gracious. And it's small too.
Yes. And this is the other history of the DC universe. Number 2, this is a DC Black Label. It is that bigger format. And this one they're all written by John Ridley with art by Giuseppe Comunicoli and Andrea Cucci, and letters by Jose Villarrubia, I think. This one, because I didn't look at the cover before I got it, I didn't know who it was going to be about, but it is about mostly Malcolm Duncan, and his girlfriend, wife, Karen Beecher Duncan, who is best known as Bumblebee. Now, I had heard of Mal Duncan before, but I never knew he was actually a hero in his own right. I thought he was just Bumblebee's husband or boyfriend. But apparently he was a hero with the Teen Titans before even she was. And I never even knew about him. And this whole book pretty much is about their relationship and their relationship to the Teen Titans and the rest of the DC universe. So this was very informative to me because most of my knowledge of Bumblebee comes from her appearing with the DC superhero girls. So and then even there, she's not a big character. She's just, one of many. But apparently he was a superhero, a black superhero, before pretty much anybody else except for John Stewart. He was a member of a team before anybody else. He was, although he was a member of the Teen Titans without a superhero identity. He was just Mal Duncan, who was on the team. And he ended up being caretaker for their hideout and all that, And then he ended up taking on a couple of different identities over the course of the years. One of which was the Guardian. Now, if you're not familiar with the Teen Titans throughout history or further DC, further back DC works, you probably know the Guardian from Supergirl TV show. That is the character that James Olsen took on, which I think now that I've read this is where they got that idea, because I knew Guardian had been a character. I didn't know much about him, but I knew he had been a character. Now seeing that Mal Duncan, a black man, took on the character of Guardian, I think that's where they pulled that from to make that in Supergirl. He also later on got a magical horn from the angel Gabriel that gave him the power to be able to beat anybody else no matter what. And he got a costume, or Bumblebee, his wife, made this costume for him to use that horn with, and he didn't like it. So he didn't wear it very often, and then it ended up going back to the Guardian costume. And then they both kind of retired from superhero business several times. And then one last time he went out to be a superhero. And this time she invented a technological horn that gave him similar powers to the magical horn he had before, and made him another costume. And he went out as this finally.
Yeah, that looks.
And that happened right before the Crisis on Infinite Earths, as you can see right there. And after that, they pretty much decided to retire. But overall, this was, quite interesting, and and I think just like the last one, it's all from the point of view of one character and how he saw the other characters that are occurring at the same time. Like last time was Black Lightning, and how he viewed the other black characters that were happening, and how they all had effect on the universe. This one was basically it's Malcolm story, although it does also have part of it told from Bumblebee's point of view. And their main relationship as another person of color was from Cyborg. And Cyborg kind of ended up eclipsing them as being, he became leader of the Titans, and, took over what probably he probably could have had a very good reason to expect that to be his role, but ended up, he willingly gave it up and let Cyborg take that, so very interesting on how John Ridley put that character through probably a lot of development that was never even written about in the comics. I'm really enjoying this series. The art is, the cover art is just great. I don't get some of the glare off of there maybe, but
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
And then the interior work, it reflects the style of the comics that was happening at the time. Here's some early Titans work, so they reflect what was going on in the comics. And then I showed you a little bit where they showed the Crisis, or here's where Supergirl appeared. So they use the same kind of art style.
That's cool.
And then we end up Cyborg, basically the same kind of thing. So it's really interesting to see one art team, going through and doing all these different styles within one book. That's fun to watch too. So I don't know how long this is going, but I'm looking forward to the next issue already.
Cool. All right. I talked about a couple weeks ago that 2021, that I was personally going to deem it the year of the Turtles. And so I was very excited to be going through reading/rereading the original 80s comics from Eastman and Laird, Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird. And I'm doing that through the Ultimate Collections, the giant 6 volumes collecting the 60 issues plus one-shots and minis and specials and stuff. And today I'm going to talk about the micro series. So within the first year, they were going to be, as they were trying to figure out where their series was going, the success of a book that they just figured they were doing one issue of. So they did these micro series issues, and trying to think, I thought I had it here. Oh yeah, I've got it over here. It's out of reach here. Just excuse me while I reach for the comic. It's over here somewhere. Hold on here. Okay. Oh, okay, I found it. Here it is, the Ultimate Collection, Volume 2. I'm going to be talking about the micro series, Michelangelo. Since it's been snowing, I figured this was a perfect timing as I got to this one-shot story, a number one in a one-issue micro series, because kind of how David was talking about those one-shots there. This here is opening up. Michelangelo is basically out for a stroll. It's snowing. He feels comfortable that with the weather conditions that he can bundle up and basically kind of blend into the crowds and not be looked at and in horror as people are wondering, why is this giant green turtle walking around? So there is somebody, that says, he looks a little sick because he's looking a little green, but other than that, he blends in pretty nicely. He's seeing people playing around in the snow. He's kind of looking at these people ice skating that he is hoping that April could teach him to ice skate someday. And then he comes across a bunch of kids that are sledding. He's like, well, this is something I can do. So he jumps in, asks if he can take a turn, and he goes in and he goes sledding as he's going through the air there and goes sledding with the kids there. And he's just kind of having fun. Now, there's this one page in here that it's pretty crazy. I turned to this, and much like the reaction of all those word balloons on the Bendis written comic there, there's a scene where he's kind of going downtown with the shops, and it's a very busy scene, as you see here in black and white. This is why you should subscribe to Crimson Cowl Comics on YouTube. Then you can see the video version of this. And it's just layered with snow. There's just so much detail. I'll go even closer there. You could still pick out, the shop names and everything there, and all that stuff is there, but then it's just overloaded with snow, which is just it kind of messes with the eyes at first, but I kind of appreciate the attention to detail. And in these hardcover collections, at the end of each individual issue, mostly Kevin Eastman goes through. Peter Laird jumps in with some commentary, but they have these annotations where he goes page by page and he talks about certain things, about little Easter eggs and why they did this. And then he talks about that page just being like, okay, looking back at it now, I realize we maybe went a little too heavy on the snow. So it's kind of funny that he was even thinking about that, years later as you grow as an artist and stuff like that. But Michelangelo goes to a toy store, and that's where the main part of this one-shot issue kicks in, because the lady who is working at the toy store is talking about the big hot toy of the year, and that is none other than Little Orphan Aliens. Little Orphan Aliens is the hot toy that everybody wants, but they're selling out, super hard to find. And Michelangelo actually, as he kind of goes through the toy store, he comes across a stray cat. And as he follows this cat outside of the store, the cat's running away. He goes to the back of the store in the loading dock, and they are loading up a bunch of these little orphan aliens for the local orphanage here in the city. And it's actually being robbed because people are realizing that these things are selling for, hot bucks. There's no eBay at the time of this. The story takes place, or it was created in 1985. So, it takes place in that time. But they're talking about, these things are, people want them. We can make a lot of money if we have a whole truckload of these toys. So Michelangelo is able to save the toys. And while doing so, and keeping the stray cat warm, keeps him nestled in his winter coat. And it's kind of a chase with these robbers and the truck. And it's Michelangelo running after it and climbing on the truck. They're going through traffic. It's a lot of action, which Kevin Eastman often talks about, how he just loves these kind of pages where it's just pages upon pages of just action scenes and stuff. That's the kind of stuff that he eats up. And as you go through the story, and once again, all of the snow is still pretty constant throughout the whole issue there, but it just shows, I think, the talent and the artistry of doing black and white, and then adding all of that extra white to the panels to bring that image out. And they go through the story, and the cops get involved. Michelangelo eventually, saves the truck and gets the robbers all taken care of, but he needs to, he makes the difficult decision of saying, if I don't take these toys directly to the orphanage, they're going to be taken by the police. They're going to be held, as evidence and all that stuff. And basically, these kids aren't going to get their little orphan aliens on Christmas Day. So Michelangelo is now in hot pursuit as the cops. Hey, isn't that the truck that was just reported? And now he's trying to race to the orphanage to deliver these toys, and that's where he's able to reconnect with the turtles as they figure out a plan on how to get through this and how to get those toys safely to the orphanage. And since this comic is from 1985, I just kind of this is more so a tease for the whole collection as a whole, because there are other micro series issues in here, as well as issues 8 through 11 of the original run in volume 2 here. But the turtles all dress up, and we end at the orphanage, and all the kids are happy. They all have their little orphan aliens, and it's definitely a good time. And it's a done in one issue, and a story that I think still holds up today. And really enjoyed that one. So I figured that was a good way to highlight one of the many stories in these giant collections from IDW for the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. All right, I just got to put this back on my shelf here. So let me just get this figure out here. Okay, just move this over here. And okay, it's all put away. All right, next up, we're going to jump over to David. What you got?
All right, and this will actually wrap up my Amalgam Comics reviews. This one I didn't jump right into because it's a mixture of characters that I don't really get into. I like his side characters. One of them would be like Thor, who I've always appreciated as a member of the Avengers or whatever, but I have a difficult time reading and really getting into like the Thor comics themselves. And I had the same thing getting into like the New Gods. A little bit was fine for me, but I just never really got into a lot of their own comics. Maybe throwing in Mr. Miracle as a side character and helping out Superman or something like that. I was fine with. I like the characters in that way, but I could just never really get into any of the New Gods stuff either. So, it seemed like it would be a real chore for me to pick up and read through Thorion of the New Asgods, which merges the character of Thor and Orion. Now, this character's been mentioned before in Bullets and Bracelets, which saw the team up of basically Punisher and Wonder Woman. They went and dealt with some of these characters. And so it's mentioned that there was this thing called like the Secret Crisis, which again, I thought was cool going back and seeing that, because that's the same name that they gave us in Doomsday Clock when they talked about a future Marvel DC thing that was hinted at that would be, the Secret Crisis. But this character has already been killed off, and they don't explain how, but he's been resurrected in this book. So it does mention that he was killed off, and even before comics, we're constantly killing people off and bringing them back. Thorion's been brought back. Thorion the Hunter. And so you get to see a lot, there's a lot of big pages like that. And you see a lot of the destruction on these worlds as they have all this battling back and forth, because it's a very similar setup to the New Gods, where we've got these two worlds, constantly attacking each other. And you get a similar thing as to, the New Gods also, where you had, these two characters, Highfather and Darkseid, who had basically in a truce swapped their children. And so, one of them had raised the other's child while the other one raised the other's child. And so you had Orion, who grew up with the New Gods, raised by as Highfather's father, Highfather as his father, but was actually Darkseid's son. And I'm sure Dr. Kurt's dad probably knows a lot more about all the history of the New Gods and everything, and could go into that a lot better than I could. But you see a similar setup here. But you throw in a lot of stuff and you get that kind of feel for, the Thor comics and the Asgardians and things like that. So there's a lot of that, and it blends really well. So if you read, some Thor comics and you read some New Gods comics, and then you jumped into this, they really do a very good job of blending it, where it doesn't feel overly like one or the other, which a lot of the other Amalgam comics did. You really felt like some of them had just, it wasn't quite balanced in the mixture of the characters. It felt like more like one character than another. And somebody who has read a lot more of these comics might disagree with that. But myself, I thought that they did a really good job in blending these worlds, blending these characters, and giving you a story that it can really be like kind of a one and done type thing. And yet it's supposed to be like the first comic of a series. And I won't spoil the ending, but it's another one of those where if it's supposed to continue as a series, how did that happen? But here we have the introduction, of Thorion the Hunter as he comes back, and just this very grand entrance that you would expect from somebody like Thor or whatever. I think this isn't something that, like those other books, I wouldn't get into it regularly, but I did enjoy, reading this and kind of picking out the things that I knew about him, going, okay, yeah, I recognize that from the New Gods, or I recognize this from, the world of the Asgardians. And I did find that I enjoyed it. Sort of some more of the artwork. Now, the other problem that I had getting into this book, of course, was that you got the John Romita Jr. art, which is a popular artist, but I've never been a fan. So here we are, we've got all these things that I normally don't like, and we threw them all into one comic, and I made myself read it, and overall, I actually did enjoy it. So yeah, I would definitely recommend, just like any of these other books, I'd recommend checking this one out as well, whether you're a fan of the characters that they use to merge together or not. It's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, I'm curious. We should take some kind of a social experiment where you reread that comic, but pair it with like a meal that you just despise, food you just never like, and see what it tastes like.
Wow, and suddenly I like it. I will mention, by the way, that this was published by Marvel Comics, this particular one. So, it's difficult to tell. I don't know if there's really been any of these that I knew for sure. There's some that I guessed on, and some that I'd been wrong on when I guessed as to who the publisher was. Some of them definitely feel more like Marvel books. Some of them feel more like DC books. Again, this one did a really good job of blending the two. So it was one that was difficult to really tell who actually published it.
And one of the hard things I thought about the Amalgama books when they came out was they were written as if they were going to be a series, but you always knew at the end they'd leave you hanging, and you'd know but they're not going to do anymore. So how am I supposed to find out?
Yeah, I've mentioned over the last couple of weeks a few times how frustrating that could actually be, because you get into it, it's they're all given this number one.
Yeah.
And there were a couple that were actually done as though they were one shots. Bullets and Bracelets was an example of it, where it was supposed to be this one shot thing. But most of these were supposed to be a series that was going to be, it was number one of an ongoing series that wasn't really going to go on.
Yeah.
So it did feel a little bit like just picking up these random comic books. The nice thing was that some of the comics did kind of let you know a little bit of what happened somewhere else. You had JLX, but then you actually got that revisited with JLX Unleashed. You had Super Soldier, and then there was the follow-up, which was actually a prequel, which was Super Soldier Man of War. So some of these characters, you got a second chance to read a little bit more about them, even though it was going to be the same thing. It's like, okay, here's another number one, but it's not going to go anywhere. There's not going to be a number two. And that is why I've recommended reading the letters pages and whatever, because they're interesting. They have a little bit of fun with them, and some of them give you some follow-up. This is what happened to this character or whatever, and they write about it as though either they're commenting back on a fan's letter, or the imaginary fan themselves had written and been like, I really love that book where this happened, and they talk about what happened to the character. So as you read through these, you got a little bit more insight into the characters. You got a little bit more, and even though you didn't get to read the stories where it happened, you're like, oh, that's what they supposedly did with the character. Like Firebird, who was a mixture of Fire from Justice League and Jean Grey. And you do see her a little bit in another book where she's now being called Dark Firebird, and it's a very brief, she's barely in it, but then it is mentioned in a letters page in a different book. How she made that transformation, and or maybe it was actually in JLX Unleashed, but they talk a little bit in the letters page about how that transformation happened, and did she really lose herself or whatever. So it's not covered in story, but it is covered in story because the letters themselves are fictitious and part of the story. Just like how you get Watchmen or then Doomsday Clock, where they'd have all these extra things. And it's like, yeah, you could just read the comic part itself and skip over those. But all these other things added to the story. And it was the same thing with the Amalgam comics. All these fake letters pages and stuff like that, the extras that they threw into them added to the overall story of all of these books. So, you don't have to read them, but it's but it adds to it.
Yeah.
Just like if you actually would read a little closer in the Black Sheep ads, the Chris Farley movie, you'd see a lot of those ads in those books that you've been reading. And when you look real close in the background, there might be some Easter eggs in there too.
Yeah. Or like if you're watching WandaVision, I don't get up and run to the bathroom when there's a commercial on.
Yeah.
Watch the commercial.
Commercial, that's right.
Good. All right. You know what? It's been around since we've talked about Doctor Strange. So let's hear some more.
Let's go back to Doctor Strange. This is actually one of the stories that comes out of that fact that Doctor Strange is now more limited in his powers. It was an arc called Strangers Among Us. It ran from Doctor Strange 60 through 65, and then Doctor Strange Annual number 4. What basically happens is that in Doctor Strange number 60 is a part of a event that's happening called Siege of Darkness. And I hope to talk about that next week. I've been trying to get all the books in that particular collection. And in that particular issue, what happens is Doctor Strange is trying to defend the Night Stalkers and Midnight Suns from invasion of creatures from hell. And they're in the Sanctum Sanctorum. And as he's fighting there, Doctor Strange is, it appears, killed, and the sanctum is totally destroyed. But it turns out that Doctor Strange isn't dead, but he's now hiding in a pocket universe because he doesn't have the power to defend himself out in the open. And another threat enters into the Marvel universe, this being Salome, who actually Doctor Strange has fought before. And he no longer has the power to confront her directly. And so he creates two magical sort of beings that he endows with parts of his power and his personality and sends them out into the world while he's hiding in this pocket dimension. And so he creates Strange, who looks, see if I can get on the screen there, like this, a masked sort of being that looks a little bit like Doctor Strange, and Dr. Stephen Vincent. And he has them secretly working for him out in the world. Dr. Stephen Vincent is kind of the persona of Doctor Strange as he was as a doctor, confident, almost arrogant, charming, and he has powers of kind of being able to charm people around him, and gains information for Doctor Strange kind of behind the scene. And Strange is a kind of projection of Doctor Strange's greatest fears, that he'll become this callous, dark force that just doesn't think about who gets hurt in the process of him winning his victories. And so these two forces are out in the world working for him while Doctor Strange is hiding away, trying to squirrel together the things that he can use to defeat Salome. And just to give you, we get this great image of Doctor Strange. Let me see if I can find it here. He just looks like a person who is on his last, his last little. This is how Doctor Strange looks in the book. Let's see if we can, oh, there, over on that side. He looks kind of scruffy and beaten down, and he's just trying to pull together everything he can to win this battle. And in the end, he does, but it costs the sacrifice of these two magical constructs as part of the victory that goes on. And it was just a fascinating, it was not only this view of Doctor Strange now depowered and not quite the same Doctor Strange as he was, but these two magical constructs are also images of things that Doctor Strange struggles at within himself, his own arrogance, his own fears of what he could become. And so we get an interesting view, I think, of Doctor Strange and having these other versions of himself out there in the world functioning. And it just is a really powerful story. The story moves along. Other people are sucked into this. Some of Doctor Strange's allies are sure that Strange, who just kills people sometimes without hardly thinking about it, is now the new Doctor Strange, not realizing this isn't Doctor Strange himself. So it presents not only this kind of struggle that Doctor Strange is facing, but also his credibility slipping within the world around him. And I found it just a fascinating story to go back again and see Doctor Strange really in a different light as these stories are kind of portraying him.
Cool. All right. And my last issue for the week here is Firefly issue number 25. New characters, new enemies. The brand new verse era starts here. For the first time ever, it's the most demanded Firefly story ever, as the series jumps forward in time after the battle with the Reavers that left some characters dead. I'm just editing. I still like protecting spoilers from a movie from 2005. Mal
Maybe
and
not everyone's seen it.
I'm just covering my bases here. Mal and the new crew of Serenity set a course for the Earth that was. That's right, fans. We'll see what's happened to Earth for the first time in Firefly history. And that means all the rules are going out the window in ways even Mal can't imagine. This is a perfect jumping on point for new fans. I've been loving everything they've been doing in the Firefly books, continuing on this story, but going prior to the movie. We did have some from Dark Horse that were sequels to the movie that were all authorized by Joss and his brother that Zach Whedon that had put together those stories. Those are awesome as well. But this year, the series jumps into launching off what they're calling the brand new verse. Coming out in March is brand new verse number 1, which takes the series even further in time. So it's not caught up exactly to this time period, but you're going to see, I think, these pieces kind of work together because this series is still going to continue on issue 26, 27, and so forth. While the brand new verse is happening as well. So what's cool about this is that you jump into a story where it says somewhere in the verse, a few years down the line, and that's why it does make it a little easier for new fans to come in. It throws the crew of Serenity into different factions. You've got them all split up. The whole time when you're reading this, you're not quite sure where everybody is. There might be some characters that we don't see, whether or not they're living or breathing. That's up for the reader to find out. But there's new captains, just the new status quo is started in this issue. And you see a mission with Zoe and Simon that are working together with some people that we haven't met. You've got Kaylee and Jane and River, over on a different side, and you see how their stories will connect, but you don't get the answers. You just get teased on what caused this, quote unquote rift. There might be a little hostility in here. You're not sure, what exactly happened because they did jump forward in time a little bit. So I'm sure that'll just kind of unravel as you pick up these issues. But I was really interested in specifically seeing the new captain of Serenity. I'll just leave it at that, as this person has taken control and really kind of put a fun, interesting spin. There are certain characters you could think that maybe would take the chain of command, if you will. And so it does leave you guessing if you haven't been or if you haven't read this series or this issue. It still kind of leaves you to guess. You may have your idea of like, all right, this person's probably going to be captain material. But there's one moment in this issue, and Eric, who once in a while jumps here on the club Zoom, sent me a message when he saw that I was going to be talking about this, saying that he wished he was able to join in today because he did want to talk about this as well. So maybe we'll get him on a later show to kind of get his point on it. There is a moment in this book, the last page reveal, that makes you go, huh? And, that's kind of perfect because that's how the first episode of Serenity ended, when Malcolm Reynolds found, he was transferring a human girl in a capsule, and this big mystery, and then it just ends on him going, huh. So you kind of have that almost same reaction of just like, okay, what's going on here? Once again, a perfect way to get you back for issue number 26. But I'm very much interested that come March, once we're getting the continuing Firefly issues and the new mini-series, the new series, Brand New Verse, it'll be interesting to see how they correlate, or if they do at all, since they both will be running. With this hitting issue number 25, I had to double check to see, okay, did I order the other issues? Are there other issues? Because this could have been easily the ending point, and then giving them a 1 month buffer until the new new #1 comes out. But no, they're running both of them, so that makes me excited. So anybody that is bummed about the short life of the show and the one movie that is, there's a lot of great comics out there. You can get the I think they call them legacy editions, maybe hardcovers that Boom Studios put out that collects the Dark Horse, all of the Dark Horse Firefly comics, and then this new series with a bunch of one shots, graphic novels, and specials in between. But yeah, I highly recommend this if you are a Firefly fan and just want more of these characters, because they're doing great work over here. This was Greg Pak has been writing this, illustrated by Pius Bach, colored by Marcelo Costa, and Jim Campbell on letters. That is Firefly issue number 25. All right. We have one more issue in our weekly review. So Dr. Kurtzad, take us home. What you got?
I'm going to have to say goodbye, so I'll talk to y'all later.
It's funny you said that because somebody else disappeared when you said that. Did you just use some... Oh, okay. Maybe you just went to the astral plane for a little bit. So.
I guess.
Bye, Jim. See you later.
Now, Jim, they're fighting. I think we have a sorcerer's battle here. Jim, now you may have missed this, Dr. Kurt's dad, but Jim was saying, I have to go, and then you disappeared.
So that's why I got kicked off.
And then you returned, and now Jim's gone. So this is why you subscribe to Crimson Cowl Comics through iTunes and all of the fun stuff through YouTube, because this issue will continue and we will see what happened to Jim hopefully next week.
Yeah, and on YouTube you actually get to see people disappear.
Exactly, yeah. All right.
In the audio version you just hear the snap.
Yep.
Exactly. All right, one final issue for this segment. Take us home, Dr. Kurtzad.
The Shadow, the Last Illusion. I've always been fascinated by the Shadow character. This character of someone who knows what's going on in the hearts of evil and is battling crime. Most of the issues of the Shadow have to do with him battling various crime syndicates, sometimes Nazi agents, but this particular one, he is fighting against the Society of United Magicians. The story opens with him studying with Harry Houdini about being an escape artist. Part of what his skills are as the Shadow sometimes is escaping from things and vanishing from places without hardly being seen. So we have a scene where it opens with him learning from Houdini the art of escape. And I always love comics where we kind of mold in this piece of history as part of the storyline that's going on. And so as the comic unravels, we find out that Houdini started a group called the Society of United Magicians, mainly about sharing secrets as magicians and becoming better at their art. But as the years go on after Houdini's death, it takes on a totally different form. Now they believe that when Houdini died, he gained the secret of gaining real magic. And they're hoping to get hold of this secret so that they can dominate the world by gaining true magical power. And the Shadow is the force that is going to stop them from doing this, because he believes that no one should have that power other than him, who does not know about it. So the comic really traces the Shadow trying to stop these magicians who set mystical traps for him along the way, his struggles to get through their various defenses. There's a great final scene where they put on a show that's meant to create a powerful sacrifice to call forth the powers of magic, and that the Shadow has to intervene to stop this. I don't know how many people have really followed the Shadow, but just the whole concept of someone who can bend the minds of people and appear to be places he isn't is just, I think it's been a great story all along. And this kind of just is so perfect within that story to have Harry Houdini as a part of it. The whole idea of real magic somehow rearing its head in this story of someone who often is more illusion than actual magic. It was really a well done and well written story. So I would recommend for anybody who loves the shadow, who loves the concept of magic, that this is a story that you would really find a fascinating and well written piece. So The Shadow, The Last Illusion.
Cool, cool, cool. All right, that is going to do it for the weekly review segment, but let's move over to the letters page. All right, saved. Audio recording again. Okay. All right. Welcome to the letters page, everybody. This week's question that we're all going to take a stab at. In the spirit of DC's future state, pick one character and where their story and status would be at any given time in the future. An example of that would be, let's say Howard the Duck is now Captain America. So basically, just arrive at that question however you want to spin it. I was thinking long and hard on where I'd like to see some of my favorite characters going through, but I wanted to pick somebody a little more obscure. I didn't want to go to a go-to Silver Surfer or Swamp Thing or Kitty Pryde or somebody. I picked somebody who made her debut in 2015 in the A-Force comics. This is Singularity from Marvel Comics, that I was shocked that got an action figure, which I blew my mind, and I had to make sure I got it because for somebody who doesn't have a lot of comic book issues, to get a comic book action figure pretty quick was pretty great. And there is, in here, every single week, which you can't see because of the glare. I'm just going to zoom in here. Every single week, you see Singularity back here in the comic book zoom. Okay, so Singularity is, she's a character that basically can open up these pocket dimensions. We talked about some of that. Dr. Kurtzstad mentioned pocket dimensions earlier, and she's this young girl who is super bubbly, super nice, ultimately doesn't know how she got to this world when she meets the Avengers. She's had a lot of stories with Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers, and she's helped on the A-Force team. In a recent Captain Marvel run I talked about last year, an arc where Captain Marvel was going through and she had to let this villain know that she had to make this villain believe that Carol was killing the Avengers to do his bidding, and in order to save all of these alien refugees. Not to be confused with Little Orphan Aliens, the hot toy back in 1985. But the Singularity was partnering with Captain Marvel to basically put these Avengers into a pocket dimension and keep them hidden, so they just appear dead and then whatever. So she has these kind of powers. She has this connection with Captain Marvel, and I've said Captain Marvel a couple times for a reason, because I would like to see her become Captain Marvel in a future story. Not only get more Singularity comics, because she's not in active current books. She just pops up every now and then. But the idea of the design of this character, who is all blue, and in the comics you can kind of see it represented in here too, where she's just kind of full of stars and galaxies, and she kind of has that type of design to her. And then seeing an awesome costume on her, kind of like when you'd see Mystique in like the X-Men costume and stuff like that. I just love that image of seeing, like, a blue character in a cool, colorful, yellow suit or something. And I think that would be a pretty awesome role to see her in a future story take over the role as Captain Marvel, a title that has changed hands from characters to characters throughout the decades. And so that would be an awesome series. I'd read a one-shot series, what have you. But to kind of see what she does as this cosmic entity who is now has given this role to for the greater good and protect everybody. And she's pretty. She has a great heart, and I think that would cause for some great stories. So yeah, Singularity as Captain Marvel. All right, David, you have an answer for this one here?
Yeah, this is kind of a tough one because all the characters that you kind of just want to think of that come to mind first, they've really done that. They've done it on multiple occasions where you see like the future version of them, where you get like an Old Man Logan or X-Men The End, or things like that where you see them in the distant future or even the not so distant future, and you get various takes on them. And so I could sit here and think, okay, well, if I was going to do like an X-Men thing and where I'd see them, first of all, I would skip the Hickman stuff, and then I would take the mutants and I would get them to a place where there's finally like people accept the mutants and they're treated just like all the other superheroes, that aren't like, hated. And they're out there just working hand in hand with humanity to make the world a better place. And I could think of, where I'd like to see Superman in the future, where I'd want to see Spider-Man in the future, or any of these characters. Batman retired and having one of the many Robins taking up the mantle, or somebody different. There's all these different things that you could think of, but have also been done time and time again. So I kind of went a different route as I'm sitting here looking at a large collection of Transformers toys. And I thought, they kind of went with IDW with some of the Transformer stuff before they rebooted it a couple of years back. They got to a place where they were kind of ending that civil war, and there were still some things going on. But they had some fun. They had the books that took place about aboard the ship, the Lost Light, where on board they had a bar and stuff like that. And you got to see some of these Transformers characters in different settings than what you're used to. So that got me to thinking, well, what if you went further down the road? The civil war between the Autobots and the Decepticons is done. They're living in peace. They have rebuilt society on the planet Cybertron. And now you get to see all of these Transformers characters doing, just living life, I'm sure you still have some trouble coming up here and there. And so you have the equivalent of like a police force or whatever. But they have cities, they have shops, a Transformer that used to be a warrior before is now he's running some sort of a Cybertronian equivalent of a bakery, and they're just living their lives, and you get to see them in all these very human-like situations.
Yeah, they could go to the movie theater and catch the latest Michael Bay flick or something,
Exactly. They have actors. Also, now Bumblebee is the star of an action movie.
Bumblebee is the Simon Williams of the Transformers. Yeah, we all know that.
But I think that would be interesting to just take a comic book, and it's something I would check out. Where it's, what do Transformers do after they're no longer doing the Civil War, and they've got these cities and everything, and it's all rebuilt, and it's this new golden age of Cybertron, and they're all just living lives that don't involve them trying to destroy each other.
Yeah, it would be like Optimus Prime and Soundwave, just want to raise a family and, create a town or something, and they just live life through the decades,
Yeah, I mean, maybe maybe Soundwave is a DJ now. He's doing weddings. You know,
I would read that. I would read that.
You know, I think that would be great. I mean, you got a little bit of it, like I said, with the Crew of the Lost Light, and they had a bar and stuff like that, and you get to see some of those characters. To me, seeing some of that was a little bit like taking some Transformers characters, both Autobots and Decepticons, and getting to see them in almost like a sitcom type situation. That's how that comic read to me. So I thought that would be kind of an interesting thing to go even further and see how society is and what they're doing years down the road after the war is over and they've made peace and everything else. I think you can do a lot of interesting things with characters like that.
I'd buy every single issue and spin off in one shot. That sounds like a good idea. So. And then just throw in, because that sounds like something Archie would do or something. So, you know, Archie and Transformers, you know, throw them in there. So the Transformers in Riverdale, that's where they can, you know, go to vacation. So
yeah, there's Pops is spread out. There's a brand new location on Cybertron now that they can.
All right. Let's jump over to Dr. Kurt's dad. What's your answer on this?
Wow, this was probably one of the hardest ones you had so far. How could I say that? But what I thought about was that, you know, sometimes it's frustrating to me when I order things from Amazon that it takes a really long time to get here. Now that Bezos has kind of turned things over to other people, what if not too far down the road, they hired Dupe and Cloak together to deliver things to your house? Just imagine, you could stuff a whole couch in Dupe. Cloak could sweep him up. They could drop at your house, pull the couch out of Dupe. You'd have it in 5 minutes. Just imagine the wonderful way you could transport almost anything from one point to another. If those two, they could make millions as a pair, and Amazon would be making all kinds of money, and we'd all be much happier because we'd get our things much faster due to superheroes.
Yeah, I like that idea. I like the idea of seeing Dupe in a uniform and wearing a cap, you know.
Here's your coach.
That's a great thought, you know, imagining superheroes working regular jobs like that. And suddenly I'm picturing too, you know, you're talking about working for Amazon. It's like, yeah, let's throw Wonder Woman in her invisible jet, but we'll just put Amazon on the side.
Hey, I like it.
Good. All right, Katie, take us home. What's your answer here?
All right. Tony Stark is going to run for president. Riffing off the very real world idea we've had to confront lately of ultra rich pseudo celebrities who are also geniuses that kind of dabble in science, wanting to be involved in public office. But I think Tony Stark could pull it off. He's very confident. He's got a lot of money, so he could probably run a very successful and extravagant campaign. And he has all kinds of contacts in the military and the superhero community, so he'd have defense down. And, you know, sometimes he likes to do charitable acts, so he'd be really good at the shaking hands and kissing babies part. And he's always invested in looking towards the future and what can we do with science and technology. So, I mean, you thought putting someone on like the moon was a goal. We're now going to be putting someone out on Pluto, I guess, or something. So yeah, Tony Stark for president.
Well, let's remember, I mean, at least in the MCU, Tony Stark wanted to build a wall around the Earth.
Yeah, and who's going to pay for it then?
And he also wanted to have a Star Wars defense, just like.
Well, look, I'm not saying he'd be a great president. I'm just saying he's going to run. Like, I don't know if everyone's going to vote for him or not, but I could see him at least doing a run.
Yeah, that's something that is, I think, very plausible in a Marvel what if scenario. So,
of course, the one thing working against him would people would bring up how many companies he's managed to run into the ground, as well as.
I mean, you're absolutely right. If we look at our current situation, I don't know if that is a critique that a lot of people will pay attention to versus just how charismatic you seem. But you're absolutely right, and I'm going to put in a recommendation because clearly I will be a part of Tony's campaign. I'm going to put a recommendation in that he hires all of you people to work in his cabinet because you have some really good ideas, and I think he could use your checks and balances, to make it more fair.
Yeah,
Well,
Jedi
the important
Ambassador,
question is-
Katie, press secretary. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Can I have that?
Pick as his VP.
Oh, good question. Well, let's see. So, who should he pick as his VP?
Pepper Potts, she's already picking up after him half the time anyway.
Yeah, I mean, that seems a natural choice. That definitely seems a natural choice. Since you're all going to be on the cabinet, who do you think should be the VP?
I don't. That might be a question for another time. Is to take your favorite, comic book character and make him president of the United States. Who do they pick as their VP?
I'm here for it.
Well, yeah, I have an answer for that, but maybe I'll just save it for next week when we. That's a great question.
We've got a spin-off.
Spin-off letters page.
Yeah.
But hopefully this ain't going to follow the brand of the comics that David is talking about. That that we would just never speak of it again. No, we're going to talk about this again.
All right, so I'll prepare for next week.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for this week's episode. Once again, follow us over on iTunes and Spotify, probably. Maybe.
Yeah.
Crimson Cowl Comic Club over on those channels, as well as YouTube, so you can check out the video versions of this. There is also, speaking of spin-offs, a spin-off podcast called Under the Cowl. David, what's that show?
Under the Cowl is kind of just whatever we don't talk about here. And sometimes we come in with topics and sometimes we don't. We just talk about actually just whatever comes to mind. But often there will be something that we come into it with and we talk about it, and we have some fun doing it. Sometimes we have a little too much fun, and so it's not for the kids. There tends to be some more adult themes in the conversation, but it tends to have a little bit of the same type of conversations and personalities that you get at the club, but talking about other things, sometimes very different things.
So yeah, that is Under the Cowl, and then there is also Under the Cowl of MS. Kirby is not here for this week's club, but he just celebrated his 100th episode. Under the Cowl of MS is a show that he does several times a week with half-hour shows that vary. He talks about comics as well as living with MS, and he goes into his daily experiences with that. He also has segments where he does Sunday comics, and he does recipes, and now he's spinning off in all these different kind of featured shows within Under the Cowl of MS, where he's kind of going through the previews catalog, but at a much more picking stuff that we don't talk about here, kind of doing some recommendations there, so the podcast can kind of go hand in hand there. And then he's also has a segment on the show too of talking about comic shops in the area and just dealing with during the COVID times and stuff like that. So there's a lot of variety on there. I can guarantee you're not going to find another podcast that is like his. It's very unique in that very specific manner. So that is Under the Cowl of MS.
Yes, and in fact, in some ways, Under the Cowl of MS bridges the gap between the Crimson Cowl Comic Club podcast and Under the Cowl.
Yeah, all three work pretty great together, and so yeah, if you like what you're getting here, you can check out those podcasts as well. Once again, in the coming weeks, we will have hopefully next week, Batman: The Adventures Continue #8, and then in the upcoming weeks, Inkblot issue 6, as well as Crossover issue #4. So that will do it for this week of the podcast. This entire time, I traveled to the plane of an old one and asked the magic tiger god for a favor.
I've been a robot in disguise.
I know what evil lurks in the hearts of men.
And I'm Tony Stark, and I approve this message.
To be continued.